Hi, everyone. Welcome to F4G Advocacy Media. You're watching the Journey series of new podcasts. I'm Mark.
I'm Crystal.
And today we have a guest with us that's an author of children's books, and she has a disability. She's going to talk to us about her journey. We're going to talk to Katie Mazika. Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Hello. Do you want me to just go on?
Yeah, just just go ahead and start wherever you want.
Okay, I'm an author and an illustrator. So I write the stories and I do the art. And sometimes I do artwork for other people's books, depending. But primarily I was trained as an illustrator and then got into writing the stories later. So my first love is the art. I love doing the artwork. You want me to just go and explain how I got to be an illustrator?
Tell us all about your journey.
All right. I was a kid who read everything all the time. I was a huge reader. When I was a very little kid, when I was 3, I had cancer in the optic nerve, rhabdomyolysis sarcoma, and I lost my right eye. And after that, about a year and a half later, I developed a hole in the dura mater, which is one of the 3 linings of your brain, osteomyelitis, and was leaking spinal fluid. And I ended up in the hospital from about May through the end of August. But all that time, my mom, this is back before they'd let your parents stay in a hospital with you. So she always made sure whoever I was rooming with was a little bit older and would read, so that I had somebody who could read with me. And that was, books were a big deal. I grew up, my mother was an English teacher. My father had been, he never taught, but he'd gone to school as an education major. And they read to me all the time as a kid. I grew up wanting to be a writer and illustrator. Didn't know about the whole illustration field when I was really young, but as I knew I wanted to be a writer. I can remember in like 5th, 6th grade, taking apart a shoebox and making a book out of it and filling it with paper and writing stories and taking it to school with me and hiding it in my desk. And I was going to write a book. So anyhow, I went to school. Like I said, I lost my eye when I was 3. From that, I ended up with epilepsy, and I had that all the way up through my 20s. They finally got the right medication cocktail, I guess, figured out when I was in my late 20s. And so I've held even on that for the last about 20 years. Thank goodness, knock on wood. But that's, I don't know, if you have seizures, it's the type of thing always in the back of your mind, with some, that all of a sudden you'll go back into that cycle of seizures again, and sort of upends your life. So anyhow, I got through high school. I was a very, very, I was a big artist. I loved it. My art classes, loved my writing classes. Some point in high school, I won some writing competitions, and my dad was like, "Yeah, I think you're really good at this." And I got to my junior year of high school, and it was art or writing, and I didn't know which way to go. I was a terrible student. I was incredibly ADHD, although nobody was diagnosing me with that at the time, because I was a girl. I hid it well. I knew that I could read something 15 times and not be able to spit it back on a test, and I could study for hours and never know what I saw, unless it was something that I cared about. And then I could tell you everything, all the little bits and pieces about it. But my mother ironically taught what was called special ed back then. Now it's got all its other new labels, but she was one of the first teachers trained to teach this new type of education. She had no clue what was going on with me. She had no clue. I was flipping words. I was struggling. And then when I got to junior high, on top of that, I was having seizures where I was just basically zoning out and missing huge chunks of my day, and just walking, and nobody could tell, because you can have a seizure without passing out. You can just sit there and stare straight ahead, and nobody knew what was going on. I just knew that my nothing made sense. There was no timeline, and I'm thinking I'm going nuts. Something's so wrong in my head, and my brain is falling apart. I had no words for it. I knew that I was missing time chunks all the way through my days. And I knew that things didn't make sense, and that people knew stuff that I didn't. And it wasn't until I had a giant seizure, a full grand mal seizure, and they pulled me into the hospital, and they were like, these are seizures. And I finally said, well, my brain is wrong. There's something horrible happening, because this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And that was when they finally said, no, those are seizures. You're losing giant chunks of time. And sitting in a classroom, and I would just stare, and nobody had any idea anything was happening. Once we knew my mom could catch it, she could tell by the look in my eyes I wasn't there when they would happen. She knew immediately, just by glancing at me, that I wasn't there. Once we knew it was happening. So school was terrible. School was terrible all the way through. I thought I was really stupid, because I couldn't get anything above a C. I could win statewide writing awards, but I couldn't get into the honors English class because my grade was too low, which drove me crazy, because I read voraciously. I got yanked out of class in 7th grade for reading The World According to Garp. I was way beyond my reading level, and I was writing and winning awards, but they wouldn't put me in the upper level classes. And so I got to the end of high school, and I knew I could do art, and I knew I could write. And art was how I got into college. I got into Miami University of Oxford on a full ride, or not a full ride, I'm sorry, on a scholarship, a very nice scholarship, based on my art. And Miami University, and the reason I chose Miami is because an illustrator showed up in my high school to talk about being an illustrator. And I'm like, he's doing art and he's telling stories. And I want to do that, because it was a little bit of the storytelling that I loved with the writing. And it was this art that I loved so much. And so that's where I went, and ended up an illustrator. And he was the entire illustration department at Miami University. So I left, because they fired him. And so I left when they fired him, and ran into him. He lived across the street from my high school. And he's like, you got to go to CCAD. And so he got me into CCAD. I had X amount of dollars left in my college bank account. I didn't have any money. And he got me a Boku scholarship. And I got through with just the money. I ended up 3.5 more years at CCAD with just the money I had left over, which was kind of amazing. He's a good guy. And graduated with a degree in illustration, did some work locally, ended up working at what they called then, God, they don't even have them anymore, digital outputs, where people would bring in, like if you were an advertising agency, you would bring in files on like floppy disks, as I know it is, or zip drives, and then we would make it so that it could be printed in any way you wanted, like in giant banners, in we would print them decals, however it was. We were basically the printing people. We would be the ones that would adjust the color and the size, and then, and then we print it out. And because I knew Photoshop, I started just working behind the counter at an art supply store, but the minute they figured out I knew Photoshop, they put me back in the back doing that. And I hated it. It was boring. I wanted to create my own stuff. But it was what we did. There's a bunch of us out of art school who did that, and we did it because we could get bootleg copies of Photoshop that way. And 'cause none of us could afford it back then. But from there, I had kids, and I stopped. When I had kids, I focused on them. My youngest was on he's autistic, and he needed a lot of my time and energy. So I spent I didn't work much. When my daughter was born, she's my oldest. That's when I switched 100% from traditional media to digital, because she was asthmatic, and I'd been a huge fan of pastels. And when you do pastels, you spray fixative on it so they don't smear. And I couldn't do it with her in the house. I was so concerned for her lungs. It was, and people were talking about Photoshop and how you could paint with it and this new, whatever. And I'm like, okay. And I'll try it out, because then I won't have to worry about making her sick. And then when my son was born, and he turned out, to have some severe issues, he had some very severe, like he couldn't cross the midline. He was very, he talked, he was verbal, but it was all echolalia. He was repeating stuff. It was getting him to have his own, and he struggled quite a bit. He would a lot of PT and OT with him. So that was kind of where everything went on pause, and it went on pause for several years. We were in one school system in Indiana, where I was actually going to school with them because they wouldn't help him with an aid. And then we got to the public schools here in Ohio, and he was getting what he needed, but it was still a battle. And I spent a lot more time in the school than I would have liked, making sure that he got what he needed to get through a day. He had also a severe facial deformity that we just like 2 years ago, I guess this fall, he had corrected it, but it was a 9-hour surgery. They broke both of his jaws, pushed the bottom one back and brought the top one forward. But because of that, he didn't speak clearly through his whole school career. So yeah, and then once he got to an age where he didn't need me quite so much, and he was more independent, which is pretty much middle school, then I went back to the art full time. And I put together a book. It was just Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I just to see if I can do it. And I did, and I put it on Amazon, and because then you could put stuff on Amazon easily, and it was quick. And another illustrator I knew had suggested it, and I said, well, okay, I'll try it out. And once I did that, and I was like, okay, I can do this, I started pushing a portfolio. And I got a portfolio together, and I got work, initially vanity presses. And vanity presses were nice because it was a way to cut my teeth. It's a way to make sure I hit a deadline. And I went through the art direction, and it was sort of like they do not pay well. And it was, there was some, usually I had some of my art direction was coming from authors who don't understand, that the page is portrait, you can't do a landscape very well, that sort of stuff. So there was a little bit of that, but I needed to know, I needed to have credits to my name. I needed to be able to go out there and say to art directors, look, I've done this. And that was a good way to do it. I joined SCBWI, and my first SCBWI meeting was like 2015. And I met some people, got to look at portfolios and see what was out there. And that was the first time I ever heard from other artists about agents. And I was like, oh, there are these agents out there that will help me get work. I need one of those.
Mm.
And so and at the same time, I found something called MATS, Make Art That Sells. It's a online classes. And I put myself in those 2 cycles of those and came out with enough of a portfolio that I got my first agent. Worked with that agent for about 18 months. And I got a lot of educational work with them. Didn't get any trade work. And so they dropped me because they wanted me to have trade work, and I wasn't getting it. But I got a lot of educational work under my belt. I ended up actually, I got very lucky, was picked up by a second agent almost immediately. And that agency was a much smaller agency, and which I liked, and very nice people. And it was a different environment. Everybody cheered each other on, as opposed to, feeling like picked at each other. This one was much more uplifting. But unfortunately, that agent, she came down with cancer and passed away.
Oh.
And so then I was kind of at a loss, and I didn't know what to do. And I'm like, do I really want to go out and look for an agent for a third time? This would have been my second time in like a year, because she got sick very quickly and closed down the agency within a year of me signing with her. So I was at a loss, and another author illustrator said to me, well, why are you looking at art agents? Go get a literary agent, just write. And it never had occurred to me before that. And then I'm like, yeah, why am I looking at like I had these illustrations I had done for my first agent that I never even got to show her. Because I'd been working on them when they dropped me, of Annette Kellerman. And I'd found her fascinating. I liked her story. So I went back to that, and I wrote it. I wrote I wrote my first picture book biography about Annette. And then went and got some feedback on it, cleaned it up some, and put it, did what they call a DV pit, which is a pitch on Twitter. It was for diversity, a diversity pitch on Twitter. And I put it out there, and I got some nice response. And one of them was from my current agent, and she and I got on the phone and talked, and I really liked her, and I liked her point of view. And she's like, I think you should write more picture book biographies about people with disabilities, and that should be what you focus on. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, I think that's something that we need, and we can find a home out there. So I signed with her, and she sold Annette about a year, about a year and a half. Yeah, I signed with her in May. We sold Annette the following August. It was several months of me working on it and putting doing the whole dummy together, and her giving me feedback, and then putting together a list that we wanted. And Beach Lane was Simon Schuster. Beach Lane were the ones that eventually picked it up. And they picked up the second one with it, which is Beulah Louise Henry. So I was very, very fortunate. And then she's a great agent. She's very, very, she's very good. She's got a great way of having a big picture. You need the big picture plan, and probably a good counterbalance for me. If you want to write, sometimes you gotta step away and say, not be just into what I want to write, but what do I want to write that's going to resonate and that somebody wants to read. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Well, not only, even if it's not about something that the general population would want to read, but if you're helping other people,
Yeah.
in the disability community, which you have a door open on that,
Mhm.
because you have your own challenges.
Yes.
And they're trying to figure out, kids especially are trying to figure out how they fit in now, because they're
Yes.
different and they don't fit the world standards of what a person should be and look like and talk like and all that.
Exactly.
So that I'm sure that is for you, that's incredibly enlightening to be able to do that kind of work.
It is. And that was something that I was really clear about with my agent. I said, I want these out there. And not just for people, I wanted kids with disabilities to have heroes with disabilities, but I wanted kids who don't have disabilities to have heroes with disabilities. I wanted this understanding that these are people who are as valuable in society as anybody else.
Right.
For everybody, not just to be, not just for the disabled kids and those, because it's important to see yourself in books, but also, the whole concept of door, mirrors, window, mirror, sliding glass door. If you see yourself or you see somebody different and develop empathy and understanding.
Right.
And I think that's so important. I go back to when I was a kid, and my favorite book was Madeline because it was the only book that showed the inside of a hospital.
Mhm.
She was in a hospital and she had a scar and she showed that scar off. And a 3-year-old me who had her head wrapped in bandages for, years, that was a big deal. I thought she was amazing. And I wanted to be as brave and bold about my scars as she was, and I wasn't. I was a much more quiet, timid kid, but I looked up to her. And there wasn't much out there, there wasn't anything, and even now, I've heard illustrators. In fact, an illustrator I know, author illustrator who did a book, with part of it was in a hospital, was told don't depict a lot of scary hospital stuff.
Mhm.
And I'm like, but these kids, they live with it. Some kids, this is they go in for diabetes, they go in for all kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
And if it's hidden and not talked about, that doesn't help. That, and it's not scary if you don't make it scary. And you don't make it mysterious and hide it. So, so anyhow, I think, and the same with, I think people they're afraid of what they don't know. And so we have to make them familiar.
I don't know if you remember, it was a long time ago, back in September, when we did our pre-interview. I spoke about Johnny Erickson Tata. Thinking back to how much I appreciate people like you that write stories like that, mirrors exactly who she is, and in a Christian kind of way, with a disability. She was able to do that same thing, and in my life, it definitely made a huge impact. I mean, not that I could share, well, I could share it, but not that anybody really cared, because disability to everybody else is boring, but to me, it made a huge impact because she would talk about issues and in a Christian way. So I was really, enthralled by it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So did you have a chance to look her up?
I think I looked her up in September, but you know what? Like you said, it's been a while.
Yeah, yeah, it's fine. But I think perhaps if you that would be a good contact for you to.
Okay. No, will you send me a link?
Of course, yeah,
Thank you.
I
Thank
can
you.
do that. Mark, do you have anything?
I did, well, you sort of touched on it. People were telling you that you don't want to scare kids by, or they were giving you the message not to scare kids by showing them the inside of a hospital or whatever. But as you kind of touched on, it's sort of scarier not to show them that, because then it lets their imagination kind of run wild.
It does. It does. Exactly. And I think we have we have to be aware of that, and we just have to be, honest and open. And kids ask me all the time, what happened to your eye? And I'm just, just tell them. And I see parents are like, shh, shh. It's like they're kids, they have questions. So, and it's okay. I don't mind when kids ask, when they're curious. It's curiosity is normal. I'm more troubled, and I've had it happen. I've had it from adults when I get the comments behind my back, and I do, and that's hurtful. But the questions aren't hurtful. They're just kids want to know and understand. And I think just got to tell them. And if you don't want to tell them, you can always say, I'd rather not say. And they're usually fine with it. But I get kids all the time. And they're funny. I always get, and anything I do, any time I read or to a group of kids, there's always it's usually a boy in the back who will sit and stare at me with one eye closed, doing this the whole time. But he cracks me up because he's trying to figure out how he's being empathetic. He's trying to understand how I see, and it always cracks me up, because the minute he sees me looking at him, he's like, I wasn't doing anything. And that's like, you were, and that's okay. And I feel bad that it feels like, something like shameful that you have to hide. So just ask. That's no big deal. You can ask. Your curiosity isn't bad.
But things like that are so sweet, though, because it shows the empathetic side of
Yes,
people.
exactly.
And so it's very evident, with people that are like, shh, be quiet, don't ask, don't talk about it, don't, they don't want to be empathetic. They want to hide you away, and they
don't want to acknowledge you.
Yeah, they're uncomfortable by it. But people like that is amazing, and especially kids don't have a filter.
No.
Kids are, before they're so impressionable, but before they're ruined by the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you just, and so, when they ask, I always, it's okay, you can ask, but yeah. And it was something my mother told me 1,000 years ago when I was very little. And I can remember, being in grocery stores and stuff, and people would stare. And she'd say, if you want to tell them, you can tell them. And if they're rude, she's like, you can tell them. And she told me, she gave me permission to use the F word. She said, if they're rude to you, you can be rude back. And I'm like, oh, in that case.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but with little kids, the little kids are never rude. That was adults. And I've had adults. I had adults when I was a kid be rude, and I've had adults be rude to me as an adult.
Mhm.
Which usually floors me, and it's like, really, but I don't know. It surprises me, but I don't know. I guess it disappoints me.
Yes. Well,
It's also,
go
sorry,
ahead.
it's also important to break that cycle, right? And like
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
adults are treating it that way, trying to shush to their kid or whatever, because that's the way they were taught and that's the way their parents were taught, and on down the line. And
Yeah.
if we don't break that cycle somehow and tell somebody that it's okay, it's going to keep going.
Exactly.
And that's kind of exactly what I was about to say. Like, people that are, like you, that are telling stories, whether it be in a book or in a movie, the actual story, not trying to glam it up and try to, the entertainment industry telling what's going to make all that money or whatever. That's the way people are gonna get the real story and understand how things really are instead of being scared of it.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. And yeah. And I see more and more of it in kids' books. And
Mhm.
that's one of my favorite things about children's publishing is it's a very diverse community, and they're open to diversity and there's a lot of open minds, and making sure that what we're sharing with the kids is helping them have empathy, and develop empathy for people who aren't like themselves. And I think that's important. We need that. And not just with disabilities, with everything, and I
Right.
think
Right.
it's important, and that we see beyond ourselves.
Yes, it's the understanding that regardless of your background
Mhm.
or your ethnicity or your disability, those are all differences. And that's what, people are so good at trying to divide. But underneath it all, we all are human. We
Yes,
all have the
exactly.
same soul,
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I think that's a touchstone that I see. I have picture books again and again go back to is and that's the whole idea of the windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors is, this is why books matter, is because kids need to be able to see not just themselves, but people that aren't themselves, and have empathy and understanding.
Right,
And then see that they're not that different.
right.
Oh,
That is so important.
yes, exactly.
You mentioned that generally people in the children's book world are more open.
Mhm.
Why do you suppose that is?
I think it because if you are writing and illustrating picture books, you grew up reading voraciously. And and well, not just picture books, but the middle grade and young adult are voracious readers. And I think the more you read, the more open your mind is to different people and different, and understanding that people are all the same, just despite their differences on the surface. So I suppose there's a lot of that. I mean, I think it's very hard to read widely. And if you're an agent, you probably have, you are an agent, must be somebody that likes to read and read widely, because that's 90% of your job. But it's hard to be somebody that reads widely, and doesn't have a mind that is open to differences.
Yeah.
I think that just comes, naturally.
And sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead. Go ahead.
And I think that's the community that's drawn to publishing too. I think that there's it's just an open community because open minds make good art and good books, good literature, you know. And I think that that's a piece of it. It's hard to be creative when you're afraid to step out of a box.
Right. It is incredibly important, you know, and if I can add to what Mark was asking about why you think it's so easy for them, it's because they understand
Yeah.
that it is so foundational
Yeah.
because at that point, kids' minds are, you know, fluid. They're not, you know, they can take in so much more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, you know, just the whole thinking back to as an adult that has a publishing company, thinking back to when you're a kid and the nostalgia of books, you know,
Yes.
and how they shaped who you are. And not just books, I'm talking about anything that, you know, media, movies, you know, books, you know, all of that. But and like school too, but unfortunately a lot of that, you know,
Yep.
is,
Yep.
anyway, I don't want to get into that. But yeah, so you know, I think it would be easy for a publisher to say, let's do this. This is gonna, hopefully this is gonna really take off. And
Mm-hmm.
from what I see, it is
Yeah.
exponentially, and you know, it's amazing.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. Excuse me. I think you're absolutely right. And I think but yeah, I think that's why we have so much, you know, and there's a lot of movements within publishing. There's the We Need Diverse Books movement, there's the Brown Bookshelf movement that are all about diversity.
Anything else, Mark?
So tell us a bit more about some of the books that you've worked on or you're working.
Yeah.
Well, I as an illustrator, I did the Chicken Soup for the Soul. I did 3 of those books. Those are fun.
Mhm.
These are my Chicken Soup books these 2 came out last year. And they were the first 2 in the series. And they were a ton of fun because they were just animals. And then I just did a 3rd in the series, this guy. And this came out about 2 weeks ago. And those are just as an illustrator. And that came out last September.
Mhm.
And then the sort of companion biography is called Beulah Has a Hunch. And Beulah has a hunch inside the colorful mind of master inventor Beulah Louise Henry.
Mhm.
And that one comes out October of this year, October 17th. And then Annette is about Annette Kellerman, who is the swimmer.
Mhm.
She was invented synchronized swimming. She's the reason we don't wear dresses to swim anymore. She's pretty interesting. She was very bold, kind of knew who she was and didn't back down. You know, she had a lot of attitude. There's a great picture of her. It's in the back matter. And it's just this woman who is all that. She's like 19 in this picture in a foreign country. And I'm like, that is a lot of attitude to be that young in a place that is unknown and have attitude like that. It's just like, I like her. She's impressive. Beulah was the opposite. Beulah was raised to be a lady. She was sent to finishing school. She had expectations set on her. And I don't think she ever wanted to disappoint her family. She tried to do it, but she had such a drive to be an inventor. And her mind just was so different. She saw it and couldn't help herself. And when I went through her history, there's this period of time from when she got out of school to when her first invention happens, where she's writing poetry for the paper and she's attending, luncheons, and it's like she's trying to go do whatever they wanted her to do. And then she's at some point, she's like, she just makes her invention. It's like, I can't anymore, you kind of, but she tried. But her brain, she was able, if you've ever read Temple Grandin, any of her books, it reminds me of how she describes how she pictures things. She could see stuff, Beulah could see stuff. She describes it three-dimensionally, being able to turn it around and inventions and see how they worked in her mind, and before she even made them. And then she would see it in her brain and she would draw it. But she never took engineering. She had no upper level math. She went to finishing school. So she had no words to say, this is a lever that is going to have a fulcrum that will make this, she had no understanding how it all went together, technically. So she hired people where she'd say, see this drawing, this goes like this. Can you make it? And they understood her. And they were like, yes, we can make that happen. And it's called A, B, and C. And this is how we make it happen. And but that is how she did. She created her first invention, which is a parasol that had removable covers and a handle that collapsed. We still use that telescoping umbrella handle today. But that was her who came up with it initially. And was like, you know what? I kind of hate having these long umbrellas in my closet. So let's make this. And she did it because she was walking around with a telescope going, I can do this with an umbrella handle.
Yeah.
So her brain just, and I know that she had I know she had hyperphantasia. I know she had synesthesia. I'm sure there were other things, but I'm not a doctor, and you can't diagnose at a distance. But when I hear stuff, I'm like, well, that's very interesting. I'm sure there is something there in her mind. And that was part of the reason why I wrote Beulah, is I wanted people to see that the mind, and autism, all of it, it's just giant spectrum of how our minds work. The synesthesia, the aphantasia, the hyperphantasia. Hyperphantasia is how she saw things, three-dimensional, where she could see them work. Aphantasia is if somebody says something like apple, you see nothing in your mind. And we are all somewhere in that spectrum. She just happened to be at the far end where that made her a wonderful inventor. And I'm fairly hyperphantasic, but that's because I draw all day, and that's sort of, I think I almost exercise that muscle. But my poor daughter, she's got nothing. She's like, I've seen nothing. And I'm like, which blows me away. I mean, we've had this conversation, she and I, multiple times. I'm like, how can you see nothing? She's like, I don't know, there's nothing. And I'm like, it doesn't compute to me. But that's what's so amazing about brains is it's such a spectrum. And so she's got this brain that works differently. And because it worked differently, she ended up being the most prolific female inventor of the 1900s. And to this day, which she holds the most mechanical inventions, or I'm sorry, mechanical patents of any woman. To this day, and with a woman who's never had engineering or physics or upper level math. She just figured it all out. So she's I finished her. I have my F and G's, which is where you get the folded and gathered, all the pieces printed up. I got my first round of those. That was just for color proofs. And it is officially up on Edelweiss. Are you guys familiar with what Edelweiss is?
Oh.
Yeah.
If you Google Edelweiss Beyond the Tree Line, it lists all the books coming out for the next seasons. And it's and once your book is up there, it means it's officially for sale. And it's, I guess, what libraries and bookstores use to see what they buy next year.
Mhm.
You know, because I guess they're buying a season ahead. So she's all done. Then and this is also with Beach Lane, Simon Schuster Beach Lane. The Sears book will come out 2025. And I'm wrapping up all the text on that and getting ready for that. That's looking to be a 48-page book, which is why we are getting that one ready now, because I will need a lot of time to get all that art done, a very technical art. But that's a book about Sears houses, and it's a book about a little boy who doesn't want to leave the house that he grew up in with his grandparents. And you know, yes, it's a cool new house, but he wants to be with his family. So and then then the other one that is more based on my childhood, but that hasn't been announced, so I can't get into the details of it yet. I'd like to, but hopefully it'll be announced soon.
Keep us updated.
Yeah, yes, I will. Also with Simon Schuster, but that one is also, and that one should be 2024. I'm not sure when in 2024.
Mhm.
But that one is dummy, which means I have it sketched out and it's kind of in the process.
Mhm.
And then after that, I have one more about Neela Park out with Simon Schuster, and that'll be 2026.
Wow.
And that one is I'm getting there. I'm worried about Sears, right? And the other one right now. So I'm working, I got a lot on my plate, and I like being busy. I'm also playing around with middle grade. I think I'd like to write older at some point. I haven't decided.
Yeah.
But I like being busy.
Like middle school, high school.
Middle grade generally will start about 9 years old when they start with those chapter books. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And they usually it gets weird. They has young middle grade and then older middle grade, and the problem becomes 12-year-olds will never read about younger kids. They want to read about the 14-year-olds. So you get 10-year-olds will read about a 12-year-old, but a 12-year-old wants to read about the 14-year-olds. So you get this, it's this weird awkward phase in books, because you don't want to be too old, but you don't want to be too young and turn off the readers. And it's but there's some fun books if you look out there. There's a lot of fun series that have been coming up. Diary of a Wimpy Kid's a classic, but there's others for that age group that sort of combine the art and the writing.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear you properly. Did you mention that one of the books was about Sears houses or something?
Yeah.
Could you explain what that is? Because I don't know what that is. Crystal, do you know what that is?
Cool.
I've heard about it, but I don't know.
This is why they need a book. From 1909 to 1940, you could get a catalog from Sears that was filled with houses, and you would order a house from Sears.
Yeah.
And the prices were ridiculous. So like $1,800, you could get a house. And you would order it, and it would come on a train car or a couple of train cars, depending on the size of the house. And everything would come to you pre-measured, every board already measured and cut and numbered. All of your shingles, all of your tiles, your bathtub, everything, your lighting, you could upgrade, because not all of them had indoor plumbing. In 1909, not everybody had indoor plumbing. But you could upgrade to indoor plumbing, you could upgrade to certain appliances, and have packages with the really fancy lights. But they came in these kits in crates, and you would come and you would unpack your kit and put it together based on the numbers, and they had instruction books. And if you got the lighting, you got your electricity book. And if you got the indoor plumbing, you get your plumbing book. And the plumbing book would be either the sophisticated plumbing book where you had faucets, or less sophisticated where you hooked to a well and had a pump in your sink. But you would put your own house together. And it was something that people did with their family members, and neighbors would help out, and they would put together homes. And they are all over there, particularly in the Midwest. The largest concentration is Chicago, followed by Ohio and Cincinnati, where I grew up. I grew up in two of them. I lived in one with my mother and my brother, and from the age of 7 to about 12, and then we moved to a second one when I was 12. And then years later, my husband and I bought our first house in Indiana, and I'm looking through this house, and it's like our third house that we've looked at, and I'm like, this is it, we're buying this. And he's like, are you sure? We haven't seen that? I said, no, this is it, Chris. I want this house. And I was like, this is it. I love this house. And he's like, okay. And my mother comes up a week later, and she walks through, and she goes, Katie, you know, this is the house you grew up in. It's a Sears house. It's the same kit. And it was the same house. I totally didn't recognize it because they put in a second stair. It had a front stairwell and a back stairwell, which threw me off. But then I'm like, oh, that is why the wallpaper going down the basement stairs is so familiar. It was the same wallpaper we had in our house. Because Sears stole the wallpaper too. They sold it all. They even, they were the ones, the first mortgages were Sears. They set up the first mortgages, and how all that, what we know now as mortgages, were initially done by Sears for the people who bought their kid houses. And then basically what happened was the Great Depression. Just, and it blew up, and thousands of mortgages did not get paid back. And they ended up folding the whole Sears company, or not company, I'm sorry, the whole Sears housing department, part of that company. The Honor-Built company was what it was, Sears Honor-Built. And the whole Honor-Built home division went under. But at the time, from the you would go into offices. They had them in Cincinnati, Chicago, Pittsburgh, all around the East and Midwest. And you would go in, and they would have showrooms, and they would show you what their bathrooms could look like. And they would show you what kind of wallpapers you could buy. And you would go in, you could go into the showroom to buy one, or you could order it out of a catalog. And the attraction was not just how little it cost, because I mean, I did the math, and a lot of these houses would be $30,000 today. They're almost nothing. But that you could adjust it. Like there were several homes where you could do it as a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. You know, you could make all these adjustments on your own. You could flip it either way you wanted. And the homes you see, the Craftsman, those were Sears homes, with all the built-in cabinetry and stuff. So they are to this day now. If it's a Sears house, it's much more expensive. So they're kind of a collector's item today, I guess. But I think it's fascinating. I think it's really cool. And you can go like in our house, you go under, and you could see markings on the wood. I told you.
That's very interesting.
Isn't it crazy? It's like a Lego set that grown-ups could buy and live in. And it's one of those things that a lot of people don't know about, and it's almost hard to believe it happened. You know?
Well, not really. I mean, are we not living in a time period where Amazon is trying to do the same thing?
Well, that's true. That's true. You're right. I think I trust Sears more, because I'm telling you, those Sears houses are still standing 100 years later.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, nowadays it's more about quantity than quality. It's more about, you know.
And yeah, it's them trying to monopolize everything
Yes,
and
exactly.
turn basic needs
Yeah.
and what should not be a bunch of money to own or have to live comfortably. They're trying to make a lot of money off it, profit off of that.
Well, what's a little mind blowing it to me is that these houses were selling for so inexpensively and they were such
Right.
high quality.
Mhm.
And it's like now you can get a much less high, the quality is not nearly as nice, but you'll pay exorbitant amounts of money. And
Right.
it feels like falsely inflated. You know what I mean?
I know that was a different time period,
Yes.
a different time period, but at the same time, it sounds like it was very much the idea of it was economical and from a standpoint that was more empathetic to serving people
Yes.
and was to making a profit off of people's inability to be able to do whatever, you know.
Yeah.
It very much was. And one of the things that they was known for is this was something for the middle class, because you're coming out of the 1800s, early 1900s, where everybody can now afford a house. It was making home ownership available to a huge population that maybe had been out of reach before. And you see articles about people who are like, oh, my parents were appalled that the Sears houses went up down the street. We had a real architect come in and design ours. And so there was a snobbery to it back then, which I find funny because now people want the Sears houses. But back then there was a snobbery to it that that they were something that you know, sort of the everyman could have a house. And it's before then, I think it was more home ownership maybe wasn't in everybody's reach.
Right.
And so you gotta appreciate Sears for doing that and doing it with high quality, giving, you know, solid homes, and they were beautiful houses. So
Yeah, like Crystal was saying, I think back then it was more about people wanting to legitimately serve customers and look out for their best interest.
yep, that's what it felt
And
like. Yeah.
especially with a lot of big companies these days, it seems like they'll say that, but they don't seem to. Yeah, well, they have to get you in the door to buy you if you to buy something from them, but yeah, they don't seem to.
They'll trust
That
it.
isn't actually what they're doing. Their ultimate goal is to line the pockets of the company and ultimately the person who owns the company.
I just got a scary ad from Amazon that I can now have a doctor's appointment with them and then fill my prescription. I'm like, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So I think I'll stick with going to my guy locally
Yeah.
so I can look somebody in the eye and, you know. But
We
yeah,
were
That brings
joking. Go ahead.
that brings up a good point. You know, we were we were discussing no, I just lost it. What were we talking about?
The
Amazon,
other day we were talking about like this musing over the fact that Amazon may get into banking or something like that.
they're going
Oh,
for medical first.
yeah, okay. Sorry. So it is very evident when somebody or a company or whatever organization is getting into it for the profit.
Yeah.
Of course, they have to appeal to the the emotional part of it, you know. But if people would only spend a little time researching and knowing because for me, it's action speaks louder than words.
Yep.
You know, if I can look up and see what actually goes on and what actual people are saying about your product and what you're about as a company, and then maybe buy it once I know that for sure.
Yeah,
And then, if more people would do that, things would not be so confusing and.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not thrilled to see one or two companies take over the whole country or the whole world, it's like, so.
No.
But
No,
maybe we should
about
get
it.
back to talking about
Yeah, it's a little bit of a tangent,
Yeah, that's a whole, oh my gosh, that's a whole podcast.
yeah.
Not just one, that's a whole entire. Go ahead, Mark.
So what else do you have going on, Katie?
That's about it right now as far as work goes, I've got my
Do you
family.
have a
and
website that people can go to know when
I
this
do,
book comes out?
www.katiemazika, KATIEMAZEIKA.com.
Okay.
And I'm always happy when, you got questions you want to ask and stuff, you could, I tell that to kids all the time, I'm always willing to answer questions about being an author or illustrator.
And it feels like you're, a good example of people are interested in getting into this kind of work with a disability,
Yeah.
who, like I mentioned, me having, the Christian background, but also the inherent need to, in some way, be able to share that with the world.
Yep.
At least to get out there in whatever avenue, you can do it.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, and I think anybody who who wants to should do it, absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think there are definitely places that what's the right way to say it? There's a market out there. There's people who want to read it and need to read it, and kids that need to see.
And then also there's people that are scared to take that step to share.
If you don't take the step, you'll never go anywhere.
Yeah.
You gotta take the step. I know it's scary.
Mhm.
But the thing about, at least with the children's book community, is it's such a great community and it's very supportive.
Mhm.
I don't know anything about adult writing, but I know that the children's book community is just very supportive and wants to see each other succeed. If anybody is interested in being a children's writer or illustrator, the first place they should go is scbwi.org. That's Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. It's $80 a year for membership. You get free webinars that are invaluable. You get the big book that tells you everything you need to know about how to send your work out, about who to send it to. Gives you lists of agents, it gives you a list of editors, it gives you a list of art directors. And it gives you all kinds of resources that'll help you find a crit group in your area. And there's local conferences that are great places to meet people that are local to you, that are doing the same thing you do. And the conferences are usually filled with all kinds of great experts, agents. You can get portfolio reviews, you can get reviews on your writing. It's SCBWI. It's where, if you want to do this, it's very good place to start.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Chris?
No, I think it was a good interview. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
you.
thank you, Katie, for taking the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
Bye-bye.
bye.